Kieran Rich's and Nolan Will's had always been at the top of the university. Well, they've always been toppers plus enemies from middle school. The competition between them was legendary: grades, sports, debates, everything. They didn't just want to be the best, they had to be better than the other. And today, Nolan lost again. By just 1 mark. It was the same damn story. Kieran always edged him out, just 1 point ahead. 1 point. It pricked at Nolan's skin in a way nothing else could. 99/100ths. That number haunted him. It was like Kieran knew exactly how to push him, just enough to keep Nolan feeling like he'd always fall short. Fed up, Nolan couldn't take it anymore. He was done. He needed a break, a chance to breathe and forget the damn number that had been driving him crazy. He walked out the door of the lecture hall, his mind racing. The closest bar was just down the street, and he didn't care anymore. He was going to drink until he couldn't feel that stupid frustration anymore. What he didn't expect, though, was to find Kieran there. Nolan walked in, scanning the dimly lit space. He was already annoyed and needed space to think, but his plans were immediately derailed when he spotted Kieran sitting at the bar, swirling a glass of wine like he owned the place. "Oh, God. Why are you here?" Nolan rubbed his face in exasperation. Kieran looked up slowly, his smirk widening. "What, you think I'm waiting around for you?" he retorted, leaning back against the bar, unbothered. "I've got better things to do." "What about you? Came here to soothe that bruised ego of yours." Nolan clenched his jaw. The last thing he wanted to do was argue with Kieran right now, but it was like he couldn't stop himself. "Oh, fuck you. Keep your ugly mouth shut." "Ugly? Me?" Kieran chuckled, the sound low and mocking. He swirled his glass of wine casually, his confidence oozing from every pore. He wasn't ugly, hell, he was gorgeous. Tall, muscular, with a jawline that could cut glass and eyes that made you feel like he could see right through you. Compared to Nolan, he was a little taller, and that alone was enough to annoy the hell out of him. Nolan wasn't lacking either. He was tall too, with sharp features, a perfect jawline, and eyes that were just as striking. He was just a little slimmer, with a waist that made him seem more delicate compared to Kieran's solid build. But Kieran's height, that always got to him. Even though he was just slightly taller. "You know, you're the only person who thinks that," Kieran continued with a smile that was way too smug for Nolan's liking. "I'm pretty sure everyone else in this room would disagree." Nolan rolled his eyes, looking away to try and calm his nerves. The club was buzzing with life, but their corner was almost empty, the dim lights casting a quiet glow over their table. Nolan leaned back, his voice casual but laced with annoyance as he took a gulp of his drink. "Anyway, why are you here?" he asked, glancing at Kieran, not even trying to hide the frustration in his voice. Kieran took a slow sip of his drink, his gaze never leaving Nolan. "To get rid of the pain of my 1 mark, he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. Nolan furrowed his brows, the irritation rising. "What 1 mark? Today's exam. Didn't you get 100 like always?" "No," Kieran answered, leaning in just a little. "I thought you did. Didn't you?" Nolan shook his head, his voice sharp. "Of course it wasn't me. I thought you got it, Kieran. I'm stuck with 99, the one number I hate. It's like some curse. You getting 100 just makes it worse. You're bad luck to me, you know that." Kieran raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Excuse me, you're the bad omen here. I always get perfect scores, and this is my first slip up." "Obviously, it's your bad luck." "The audacity," Nolan muttered, rolling his eyes. "You're so full of yourself. And you're just mad because I always beat your score," Kieran countered with a smirk. "Yeah, says the guy who got the same score as me this time," Nolan shot back, smirking. "Aw, fuck you," Kieran snapped, annoyance flashing in his eyes. Nolan leaned in closer, his voice dripping with mockery. "You wish." Their argument spiraled out of control, escalating into a childish war of words. They took swigs of wine between insults, the tension building until it hung in the air like a spark waiting to ignite. The space between them seemed to shrink with every word, the alcohol making their breathing heavier, the heat between them undeniable. "You think you're so great, don't you?" Nolan said, his voice low but filled with frustration. "Aren't I?" Kieran shot back with that same cocky smirk. Both of their faces were flushed, their breath shallow. Nolan glared at him for a long moment, something shifting in his chest. Then, without thinking, Nolan grabbed Kieran by the collar and pulled him in, crashing their lips together. Kieran's eyes widened in shock, but the surprise only lasted a moment. It didn't take long before they both dove into the kiss, messy, heated, and full of frustration. Their lips clashed aggressively, teeth biting, bodies pressing close, as if the kiss was the physical manifestation of every fight they'd ever had. Kieran could have shoved him away. But he didn't. Instead, he fisted Nolan's shirt and dragged him closer, deepening the kiss like it was a battle they needed to win. "Do you know what you're doing?" Kieran whispered, his eyes dark and locked onto Nolan's lips. Nolan smirked against his mouth. "Yes. Why? Scared. My foot." Kieran's voice was a low growl, a smirk tugging at his lips as he grabbed Nolan's wrist and pulled him toward the VIP room. They stumbled inside, the door slamming shut behind them, and before they could take a breath, their lips collided again, messy and hungry. Every kiss seemed to tear down the walls between them, the rivalry turning into something far more primal. Nolan's hands tugged at Kieran's shirt, popping buttons off as they fell to the floor. Kieran's hand slid under Nolan's shirt, feeling the smooth skin, his touch sending sparks through Nolan's body. "Didn't expect you to be such a good kisser," Kieran murmured, his breath hot against Nolan's ear. "I wonder what else those lips can do." Nolan smirked, his fingers skimming down Kieran's pants. "Wanna find out?" He pushed Kieran onto the bed, his body following soon after, hovering over him. Kieran looked up at him, watching with dark eyes as Nolan tugged his shirt off and tossed it aside, his fingers already working on the buttons of Kieran's shirt. "You have no idea what these lips are capable of," Nolan whispered, his voice dropping an octave. Kieran didn't say a word. Instead, he flipped them over, pinning Nolan beneath him as their lips crashed together again, more aggressive this time. The heat between them was unbearable, their hands gripping, pushing, pulling at clothes. The bed creaked beneath them as their bodies tangled together, both too lost in the moment to care about anything else. Their breath came in harsh gasps, the room filled with the sound of their desperate kisses, their hands roaming, exploring. Every touch, every kiss, seemed to erase all the years of rivalry and replace it with something far more intense, something they could no longer ignore. The night stretched on, a blur of heat and chaos, their bodies moving together in sync, as if the world outside had ceased to exist. And when the morning came, they would both know one thing for sure. When the morning light filtered through the curtains, everything felt different. Both Kieran and Nolan sat on the edge of the bed side by side, completely disheveled. Their clothes were scattered around the room, but neither of them spoke a word about what had happened. It was like an unspoken agreement, a heavy silence hanging between them. Kieran rubbed a hand through his messy hair, his upper body exposed, his eyes darting to the floor before finally meeting Nolan's gaze. "We can assume it was just stress relief, you know, to ease the marks," he said, voice low but laced with a hint of amusement. Nolan, still wrapped in the blanket, let out a sigh, his face flushed. "Yeah, just that." His fingers gripped the fabric tighter as if it would shield him from the embarrassment that was creeping up on him. Kieran nodded, trying to act nonchalant, though there was a faint flush on his cheeks. "Cool." The awkwardness lingered as they quickly showered, both of them avoiding looking directly at the other. When they finally stood before each other, freshly dressed, they couldn't hide the fact that the night had left its marks on them. Dark bruises and bite marks littered their bodies, a reminder of their chaotic, heated encounter. Nolan limped slightly as he pulled on his shirt, cursing under his breath. He was pissed. He had thought that, at least in the heat of the moment, he'd be the one in control, the one on top. But no, Kieran had turned the tables on him. Like always. "Maybe we should just forget it," Nolan muttered, scratching his hair, still angry at how things had gone down. "Pretend it never happened." Kieran ruffled his hair, his expression still serious but with a hint of a smirk tugging at his lips. "I don't think so." He tilted his head slightly, eyes glinting with a mischievous spark. "Maybe we can just keep it low-key. You know, stress relief. No feelings involved. What do you say?" His voice was casual, but there was something in his eyes that made Nolan pause. Nolan stared at him for a moment, his mind working through the idea, but he wasn't thinking too much about it. He just nodded. Sounds okay. Kieran's smirk widened. Before Nolan could even react, Kieran grabbed him by the collar, yanked him closer, and slammed him against the wall, their lips crashing together in a sudden, forceful kiss. Nolan froze for a second, surprised by the intensity, but it only took a moment for him to kiss back just as fiercely. Their lips moved in sync, desperate and hungry, like they couldn't get close enough. Kieran's hands were everywhere, tugging at Nolan's clothes, pulling him tighter against the wall as he deepened the kiss, his body pressing flush against Nolan's. Nolan gripped Kieran's arms, his breath coming in ragged gasps as their heated kiss turned even more intense, both of them ignoring the consequences, the tension, the weight of what they had just agreed to. Reaching their dorms, both walked in silence, awkward, almost tense. The hallway was empty, the stairway eerily quiet. And, of course, their rooms were right next to each other. "We have an English test tomorrow," Nolan muttered as they reached their doors. "I'll make sure I get full marks this time." "We'll see," Kieran smirked, clearly unimpressed. But as expected, Nolan got 59 out of 60. Again. That cursed number haunted him, he always missed just one damn point. His grip on the test paper tightened in frustration. Annoyed beyond belief, he stormed out, searching for Kieran. It didn't take long to spot him on the stairs, casually smirking down at his own paper. "Look who it is," Kieran grinned, holding up his test. "Guess what I got?" Nolan's eyes zeroed in on the bold, mocking 60/60ths. That was it. The anger boiled over. Before he could stop himself, he shoved Kieran hard against the wall, not caring if he hurt him. Then, without thinking, he crashed his lips onto Kieran's in a furious, punishing kiss. His teeth bit down on Kieran's lip, drawing a sharp gasp from him. "Ouch!" Kieran yelped, blinking in surprise. "That's what you get for scoring higher than me," Nolan snapped, glaring at him. "I hate you." With that, he turned to storm off, but karma had other plans. His foot slipped, and before he knew it, he was tumbling down the stairs, landing flat on his ass with a loud thud. Kieran burst into laughter, gripping his stomach. "That's what you get for hurting me." "Aw, fuck you," Nolan groaned, rubbing his back. A sharp sting made him wince, his knee was definitely scraped. Kieran's laughter died down slightly. "Did you get hurt?" His voice was noticeably softer. Nolan scoffed, crossing his arms. "Sorry to burst your bubble, but I'm perfectly fine. Don't look so happy about it." The moment he tried to stand, though, pain shot up his leg, and he fell back into silence, sulking. Kieran sighed, shaking his head. "You're impossible." Without another word, he crouched down and, before Nolan could protest, lifted him effortlessly in a bridal carry. Nolan's brain short-circuited. "What the? Put me down. You can't just pick me up like this. I am not a girl." "Ah, my reputation." Kieran completely ignored him, carrying him all the way to the nurse's office. After getting Nolan patched up, he carried him back to his dorm as well, dumping him onto the bed. Still rattled, Nolan watched in disbelief as Kieran went about fixing his messy blankets. Then, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, Kieran made him hot soup, set the meds on the nightstand, and casually warned, "Don't get your bandages wet." Nolan sipped his soup, staring at him suspiciously. "Why are you acting like you care?" Kieran glanced at him and, without missing a beat, said, "When didn't I?" Nolan froze. Wait, he wasn't wrong. Kieran was always the first to notice whenever he was in a bad mood. Always teasing him, but also always helping him. If he was injured, Kieran somehow managed to drag him to the nurse. If he was frustrated, Kieran had this annoying way of throwing words at him that, whether he admitted it or not, actually made him feel better. Had Nolan really never noticed? For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. And Kieran just smirked. Kieran had told Nolan countless times to just go to sleep, but, as always, Nolan was too stubborn to listen. They had another mock test tomorrow, and he was determined to score full marks this time. Ordering Kieran around like a personal assistant, he piled books onto the bed and started studying. With an exaggerated sigh, Kieran grabbed a notebook and sat beside him, pretending to study. Instead, he absent-mindedly tapped his pen against the pages, his gaze fixed on Nolan, on the way his brows furrowed in deep concentration, the way he chewed on his bottom lip in frustration. The night air grew colder, prompting Kieran to adjust the air conditioner. When he glanced back, Nolan was sulking, glaring daggers at his notes. "I swear," Nolan muttered, rubbing his temple, "I'm going to lose my mind if I have to look at this formula again." Kieran smirked. "Then don't look at it." Nolan blinked, tilting his head. "Then what the hell do I do?" "Come here." Before Nolan could process, Kieran yanked him in, crashing their lips together in a desperate, heated kiss, right there between open textbooks and scattered notes. It wasn't soft, it was a challenge. When they pulled back, both were breathless. "Shit," Nolan muttered. Kieran smirked. "Better." "Yeah, one more." Kieran chuckled but didn't hesitate, capturing Nolan's lips again, this time harder, deeper. Nolan barely registered the way Kieran's body pressed him further into the bedrest, his own hands tangling into Kieran's hair. Their lips moved with aggressive need, tasting, devouring, wanting more. "If you want, I can help you with the formula," Kieran whispered between kisses, his lips brushing against Nolan's jaw. Nolan was dizzy, his eyes flickering to Kieran's lips, dark and swollen. Okay." His fingers caressed Kieran's cheek, his nails dragging lightly over his neckline. "Later." And he pulled Kieran back in, sealing their lips together again. Kieran groaned against his mouth, gripping Nolan's thighs, while Nolan's fingers traced every line of Kieran's face, memorizing him. The heat between them grew unbearable. Kieran's hands roamed too freely, Nolan's breath turned too ragged, and both knew, if they let this go on any longer, there would be no stopping. Breaking the kiss, their lips still glistening, they turned away, feigning focus on their books. Minutes passed, but the heat lingered. "I already know this chapter," Kieran finally muttered. "Yeah, just one formula won't fail me," Nolan replied, but the words barely registered. The next second, the books and notebooks were forgotten, sliding to the floor as they crashed together again. "Let's go gentle, we have classes tomorrow," Nolan whispered, his voice breathy as Kieran's lips trailed over his neck and collarbone, sucking with deliberate slowness. "Sure," Kieran murmured, though his actions were anything but hesitant. Soon, clothes joined the books on the floor, the room filled with soft gasps and muffled moans, much gentler than their first time. Maybe it was because Nolan was hurt. Or maybe it was because this time, there were more feelings attached than either of them realized. The next day, both walked through the hallway together, yet annoyed with each other cause last night went too long. Kieran strolled casually, hands in his pockets, watching Nolan, who was too focused on trying to understand last night's formula to notice. They had woken up groggy, washed up, and, despite the lingering awkwardness of the night before, Kieran had made him breakfast, helped him change and even made his bed before they headed to class. Nolan muttered under his breath, eyes closed as he recited the formula over and over, oblivious to their classmates around them. Kieran sighed and gently pulled him aside before he could bump into someone. "I really don't get it," Nolan whispered, scratching his neck, right where last night's marks still lingered. Kieran stiffened, his gaze flickering to the faint reddish spots. A sudden warmth crept up his ears. He glanced around before slowly fixing Nolan's collar, shielding the marks from curious eyes. Nolan didn't even react, casually tilting his head, granting Kieran full access while his mind stayed glued to the formula. When they reached the classroom, Nolan immediately buried himself in his notebook, determined to cram before the exam. Kieran, meanwhile, slipped out for a moment and returned with a cold drink, setting it beside Nolan. "Have this. Calm your mind down first." Nolan gave a small nod, still reading. With an exasperated sigh, Kieran poked the straw through the lid and held it closer to Nolan's lips. Without taking his eyes off the paper, Nolan took slow sips, his mind too occupied to question the small, unconscious intimacy between them. Then the exam began. Nolan prayed hard, gripping his pen as if his life depended on it, while Kieran chuckled beside him. Nolan shot him a glare. "Can't you look at anything else other than me?" Kieran smirked, resting his chin on his palm. "I can't." His voice dropped slightly as he added, "You're the only sight my eyes ever hunger for." Nolan's mind raced, heat creeping up his cheeks. He quickly looked away, pretending to focus on the exam. Kieran, on the other hand, felt his ears turning red as well. Without another word, they both forced themselves to concentrate, though the tension between them refused to fade. After the exam, both sat in the empty classroom, Kieran all calm and Nolan annoyed at his result as always. "What in the actual fuck?" Nolan groaned, throwing his test paper aside. "I didn't just know this one formula, and they had the audacity to give a whole damn question on it. Of 2 marks. He was used to scoring 1 mark less than perfect, but this time, it was 2 marks, 78 out of 80. Arms crossed, lips pouting, he sulked. "This is all your fault," he grumbled. Kieran smirked, twirling his own paper between his fingers, "A perfect 80/80ths, as always." "I guess it is." Nolan shot him a glare. "Ah, just wait, one day, I'll get a perfect score for sure." Kieran chuckled. "Oh, and then what?" "Then," Nolan huffed, still pouting. "Then I'll allow myself to fall in love with you. I don't want to love someone better than me. We must be equals, or me, better than you." Silence. Kieran's eyes widened slightly. Nolan froze as well, realizing what had just come out of his mouth. "No, wait. That's not, forget it. It wasn't for you, I mean, it came out wrong." "No, I mean, my mouth just said nonsense. Don't take it seriously, okay? I'm never falling for you," Nolan exclaimed, waving his hands frantically. Kieran raised an eyebrow. "Why? What's wrong with falling for me?" Nolan shrugged too quickly. "You're not my type." "Oh, then what is your type?" Nolan scoffed, leaning back. "Someone rich, super handsome, tall, almost perfect. Someone who gives me all their attention, loves me the most, always protects me and spoils me. Someone who sees nothing but me and happily tolerates all my nagging and tantrums." His words trailed off as the realization slammed into him like a truck. His heart pounded. Wait, what the hell? Everything he just described. It was Kieran. "You were saying." Kieran's voice was low, smooth, his eyes fixed solely on Nolan. I was saying nothing." Nolan stammered, face burning hot. Kieran's smirk faded. His expression turned serious as he suddenly leaned in, closing the distance between them. Nolan's breath hitched. "You're sure?" Kieran asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His hand rested on Nolan's thigh, fingers tracing slow, lazy circles. "Of course. What else do you expect?" Nolan muttered, his voice unsteady. He refused to meet Kieran's gaze, but his body betrayed him, heated, tense, giddy inside. Kieran studied him for a moment longer before leaning back, nodding with a small, knowing smile. "All right then." Nolan still didn't look up, his heart hammering. Damn it. Why was his heart racing like this? What did it mean? Nolan spent the entire day sulking. He thought ignoring Kieran would help, maybe his stupid heart would stop acting weird whenever the guy was around. But his plans crumbled when their class suddenly decided on a night out. And somehow, he got dragged along. Now, sitting at the table, sipping his drink, Nolan tried to keep his breathing steady. Because right next to him was Kieran. And Kieran's hand hadn't moved from his thigh the entire night. Nolan tried to distract himself, laughing and casually draping an arm around one of their classmates. Maybe he got a little too touchy, or maybe the alcohol made him bold. Someone asked, "Are you dating anyone?" Nolan smirked, teasing, "Why? Do you wanna date me?" He even swung his arm around the classmate for extra effect. Big mistake. Kieran's fingers tightened on his thigh. Nolan barely held back a gasp when he felt that grip slide dangerously close to his inner thigh. His whole body locked up. Heat rushed to his face as he immediately pulled back from his classmate, pretending everything was normal. When he risked a glance at Kieran, the look he got made his stomach drop. A sharp, dark glare. Nolan gulped. Heart pounding, he excused himself and headed to the bathroom. He splashed cold water on his face, taking deep breaths. What the hell was that? The door creaked open. Nolan met Kieran's gaze in the mirror, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyes burning. Nolan turned, narrowing his eyes. "What were you thinking?" Kieran didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed Nolan's wrist, spun him around, and pinned him against the wall. Then he kissed him. Hard. Aggressive. Nolan didn't stop him. Didn't even hesitate. He kissed back, and damn, they could still taste the wine from earlier, but neither cared. It was heated, desperate, raw, tongues clashing, breathing heavy, hands pulling, pressing, needing more. When they finally broke apart, Nolan was breathless. "Are you mad?" he murmured, fingers teasingly playing with Kieran's hair. Kieran's dark gaze didn't waver. "Don't you know?" he asked, voice low, dangerous. His fingers pressed against Nolan's lips, squeezing slightly. "I hate sharing." Nolan chuckled, smug, but his breath still uneven. "Oh, I know." His hand traveled downward, slow, teasing, sensual. He stopped just at Kieran's pants, fingers grazing his crotch. Kieran sucked in a sharp breath. The next thing Nolan knew, Kieran had yanked him out of the bathroom. As they walked out, Kieran casually texted the group chat, feeling sick. Heading home. He didn't even wait for a reply. Nolan's back hit the wall hard, a loud thud echoing in the dimly lit hallway. But Kieran's hand was already there, cushioning the impact, protecting him. Their kiss was hungry, aggressive, all heat, all frustration. Kieran's free hand fumbled with the key, trying to unlock his dorm room without breaking their desperate rhythm. The second the door swung open, they stumbled inside, Kieran kicking it shut behind them. Click. Locked. Nolan's lips curled into a smirk, breathless. "Damn, this is so exciting." Kieran didn't humor him. Instead, he shoved him onto the bed, climbing over him, eyes dark with something dangerous, possessive. "Shut up," Kieran muttered, voice deeper than usual, maybe from earlier anger, maybe from something else. His fingers ghosted over the hem of Nolan's shirt. "Clothes. Off." Something about that command sent a thrill down Nolan's spine. His throat felt dry, his breath quickening as he nodded. Clothes hit the floor. The room soon filled with ragged breathing, gasps, moans, the creak of the bed beneath them. The next morning, both stirred awake, bodies sore, but satisfied. Freshening up together was almost routine now, Nolan sitting on the counter, lazily brushing his teeth, while Kieran moved around, preparing breakfast. Now, back on the bed, Nolan was glued to his phone, engrossed in a game. Kieran sat beside him, reading a book, barely paying attention to the movie playing in the background. Neither of them really cared about it. "Aw, fuck, you dumb game," Nolan groaned, tossing his phone onto the bed in frustration. Before Kieran could react, Nolan suddenly grabbed him by the collar and pulled him in. Their lips crashed together. Kieran barely had a second to process before he smiled against Nolan's lips, returning the kiss just as eagerly. The rest of the day passed in blissful laziness, eating, playing games, studying, and, more often than not, just lying around in each other's arms and eating themselves out. The next day in class, Nolan was fuming, so mad he wouldn't shut up, blabbering nonstop because he couldn't understand a single math formula. And when Nolan was mad, everyone knew it. "I hate this. Like, why the fuck do I have to subtract, then add, then go over the formula again? Who even came up with this bullshit?" His voice rose in frustration, filled with dramatic complaints, drawing the attention of the entire classroom. Some classmates chuckled, finding him cute. "Kieran," he just scoffed, gripping Nolan's thigh casually under the desk. "What do you want to eat?" he asked, already knowing the one way to shut Nolan up. Nolan pouted. "Chocolate cake." Kieran smiled. "Then let's go get you some." Without waiting for an answer, Kieran started packing both their bags, collecting their books, and slinging them over his shoulder before leading Nolan out of the class. Nolan obediently followed, until his eyes landed on an ice cream truck. His steps halted. "I want ice cream too," he announced. "No," Kieran answered flatly. Nolan whipped his head around. "Why not? It's cold. You'll get sick." "No, I won't. And I want ice cream. You can't say no to me. You know I hate when people say no." Nolan crossed his arms, his cheeks puffing up, a clear display of his spoiled personality. Kieran sighed, shaking his head. Of course he knew Nolan's personality, his quirks and how of a spoiled brat he was. He'd never say it out loud, but he adored this side of Nolan. "Fine." That was all Nolan needed to hear. His face lit up instantly. Minutes later, they both held their ice creams, Nolan happily licking his while Kieran just watched him. His gaze was soft, gentle, the kind of look reserved for something precious. And maybe, just maybe, Nolan was starting to notice. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the rain started falling, not rough, just a soft, gentle downpour. Kieran reacted instantly, handing his ice cream to Nolan before shrugging off his jacket and placing it over Nolan's head, shielding him from the rain. Nolan huffed, lightly pushing him away. "Don't do that. It's been so long since it rained." Still licking his own ice cream, he absent-mindedly took a lick of the one Kieran had given him to hold. Kieran stared. He swallowed hard, suddenly feeling flustered. "I just don't want to deal with your tantrums when you get sick," Kieran muttered, clearing his throat. Nolan pouted. "Okay." Yet, Kieran remained, still holding up the jacket, making sure Nolan didn't get drenched, even though he was getting wet himself. Nolan, of course, noticed. "Why are we just standing here? I still want cake," he suddenly exclaimed before bolting ahead toward a cafe. Kieran sighed, running a hand through his now wet hair before following him. By the time they returned to their dorm, cake in hand, both had changed into warm clothes. Nolan happily dug into his cake, his legs casually draped over Kieran's lap, squirming as he played with his feet on his lap. Kieran, however, was focused on his book. Barely paying attention, but his hands were on his legs, fingers trailing up and down. "You don't want any?" Nolan asked between bites. Kieran shook his head without looking up. Nolan knew Kieran never liked sweets much. But Nolan, he was sneaky. Finishing his cake, he intentionally let the chocolate frosting smear his lips. Then, grinning mischievously, he set his plate aside, took Kieran's book, and climbed onto his lap. "Kiss me," Nolan giggled. Kieran furrowed his brows. "Finish your cake first." Nolan shrugged. "No, I want you to have some. Like this." And before Kieran could react, Nolan grabbed his face and kissed him, hard. Their tongues clashed, and Kieran involuntarily tasted the chocolate. Sweet. He didn't like sweets. But somehow, from Nolan's lips, it was different. It was better. Maybe, just maybe, he didn't hate sweets after all. Well, except when they weren't from Nolan's mouth. After a heated night, the next morning, Nolan was the first to wake up, which was strange. It was always Kieran who woke up first. Frowning, Nolan turned his head, finding Kieran still asleep. His eyebrows were furrowed, his face paler than usual. Nolan reached out, pressing the back of his hand to Kieran's forehead. "Hot. Great, you're burning up." Nolan groaned, sitting up properly. Kieran stirred at his voice, his eyes fluttering open. He immediately tried to sit up, but Nolan pushed him back down with surprising firmness. "Stay put," Nolan ordered. "You took care of me before, so now it's my turn." Kieran stared at him, mildly surprised. Nolan, taking care of someone. Yet, true to his words, Nolan actually did well, for someone who had never cared for anyone before. He wiped Kieran's burning skin with a cool towel, helped him change into fresh clothes, and even ran to the nurse's office to get medicine. By the time he returned, Kieran had fallen asleep. Nolan set the meds aside and marched into the kitchen. To cook. "Cooking must be easy," Nolan muttered, rolling up his sleeves. With full confidence, he grabbed an egg and a knife. And then he tried to peel it. Like a potato. "Wait, is this an egg?" he mumbled, pausing in confusion. "Then where's the potato?" He scanned the kitchen before rushing to the fridge, grabbing a tomato instead. Comparing the egg and tomato, Nolan frowned deeply. Quote, "Aren't potatoes supposed to be yellow?" In the middle of his dilemma, the egg slipped from his hands, crashing onto the floor. And that was just the beginning. Within an hour, the entire kitchen was a disaster. The oven shut down because he didn't know how to turn it on. Vegetables were scattered everywhere, he had been too busy figuring out what each one was. Flour covered the counters. Soap bubbles flooded the sink, he just wanted to wash the veggies. By the end of it, Nolan was a mess. His hair was disheveled, his face had streaks of flour, and his hand was slightly burned. Thankfully, it wasn't too bad, or else, he knew Kieran would throw a lecture. That thought alone made him pause. Kieran was always like that, wasn't he? Always taking care of him. Cooking for him. cleaning after him, making sure he never got hurt, because Nolan always threw tantrums whenever he did. Somewhere inside, warmth bloomed in his chest. Kieran always looked out for him. When Kieran finally woke up, he was met with an even bigger surprise. Nolan walked in, carrying a tray with medicine, water, and a bowl of porridge. Kieran blinked. "Did you make this?" Nolan smirked and proudly lied. "Of course I cooked it." Kieran's gaze shifted toward the kitchen. "A total disaster." "Yeah, no way. You sure you cooked it?" Kieran asked again, staring at the porridge with pure disbelief. That hurt Nolan's pride. Why the hell can't you just trust me?" Nolan huffed, crossing his arms. "Why can't you just believe I cooked it?" Silence. Then, Kieran slowly raised an eyebrow. "Did you?" Nolan pouted before finally sighing. "Fine. I ordered it. Now eat." He shoved a spoon into Kieran's mouth, shutting him up. Kieran blinked before chewing. Nolan smirked, thinking he won, until Kieran chuckled. That was the last straw. With a scowl, Nolan punched his arm. "Ow," Kieran muttered, still grinning. He might have been sick, but teasing Nolan was still his favorite thing to do. The time Kieran woke up in the middle of the night, he felt much better. Slowly sitting up, he glanced around to find Nolan curled up on the couch, his legs tucked underneath him, holding a book, glasses perched on his nose, and his lips slightly parted in deep sleep. Kieran couldn't help but smile softly. Nolan had stayed up, reading and waiting, probably thinking Kieran would wake up needing help. The warmth spread through his chest, his heart beating faster. It made him feel more than just affection for the person beside him. Kieran quietly moved to Nolan's side, gently removing the glasses from his face and setting the book aside. He reached out, cupping Nolan's cheek, then pressed a soft kiss to the tip of his nose. Carefully, Kieran lifted Nolan in his arms, carrying him to the bed. He tucked him in with tenderness, ensuring Nolan was comfortable. Then, Kieran took a deep breath. His gaze shifted around the room. The mess from Nolan's cooking attempts was everywhere: the kitchen, the table covered with meds and takeout containers, and clothes scattered in the bathroom. He couldn't help but smile at how chaotic everything was. But Nolan had tried, in his own way. The entire morning, Kieran cleaned up the mess, preparing breakfast, Nolan's favorites, of course. He was humming softly when he heard Nolan murmuring in his sleep. "Dumb Kieran. Just wait. I will top you once for sure, mghmm." Kieran couldn't help but chuckle, affection filling his heart as he worked. When Nolan woke up, he was met with the smell of fresh food. His half-open eyes blinked, trying to focus. He stretched and looked around, his gaze landing on Kieran, who was serving him breakfast. "You're awake." Kieran smiled warmly. "Go freshen up." Nolan's response was a sleepy murmur. "I took care of you the whole day yesterday, now I'm tired. Take responsibility." Kieran chuckled softly, clearly used to Nolan's lazy demands. "Of course," he said gently, helping Nolan to the bathroom, washing his face, and guiding him as he brushed his teeth. After that, he led Nolan to the table and pulled him onto his lap. Kieran began feeding him, smiling as Nolan relaxed into the moment. "You know, I should learn cooking," Nolan mumbled casually, his fingers running through Kieran's hair, then brushing over his eyelashes with a gentle touch. Kieran wiped a bit of food from Nolan's lips and looked at him with a soft smile. "No need," he said. "You have me, don't you?" Their eyes locked, and something unspoken passed between them. Nolan's heart skipped a beat, and he looked away, his face turning slightly pink. "Will you cook for me forever?" he asked quietly, wrapping his arms around Kieran's neck as he snuggled into him. Kieran's smile deepened, his eyes holding so much warmth and depth that it made Nolan's heart flutter. "I will." Nolan blinked, a little shy at the sincerity of the words. His heart raced, and he quickly hid his face against Kieran's neck. Kieran laughed softly, his hand gently rubbing Nolan's back, holding him close. "Ah, so boring." Nolan lazily lay on the bed, his legs swinging in the air as he watched Kieran wash the dishes. The silence stretched on, but Nolan's patience was wearing thin. His eyes followed Kieran's every movement, sulking quietly. Kieran finished with the dishes and dried his hands, glancing over at Nolan, his curiosity piqued. "What happened?" he asked, his voice soft but carrying a hint of concern. "What do you need?" Nolan's gaze never wavered. He tilted his head slightly, his eyes dark with intent. "You," he said, his voice low, his desire clear as he stared directly into Kieran's eyes. Kieran's smile spread slowly across his face, the warmth and affection in it unmistakable. He placed the towel aside, his gaze never leaving Nolan's. Without a word, he swiftly unbuttoned his shirt, each movement deliberate as he walked over to the bed. Kieran knelt down beside Nolan, leaning in as his lips found Nolan's, their kiss deepening almost instantly. His hands moved to cup Nolan's face, pulling him closer as the kiss became more heated, their bodies aligning in a gentle but urgent embrace. The world outside faded away, leaving only the heat between them, the quiet intimacy of the moment. Time passed, and everything between them changed completely. The lingering touches, the kisses, the time spent together, it all felt different now. More intense, more beautiful, especially for Nolan. He was completely caught up in his feelings. Every touch, every kiss left him flustered, wanting more. He found himself craving every second spent with Kieran, drawn to him in ways he never imagined. But just when things were spiraling into something wildly intoxicating, their finals arrived. Now, both were equally stressed, but Nolan felt it more than ever. He remembered what he had said that day, that he wanted to be good enough. To do better, to be equal to Kieran. He wanted Kieran to be proud of him. To impress him. So, he studied harder. But as the night deepened, exhaustion and anxiety crept in. His head throbbed. His chest felt heavy. He glanced at the clock. Midnight. Frustrated, overwhelmed, and needing something to ground him, he grabbed his books and left his dorm. He knew exactly where to go. Like always, Kieran's dorm room was open for him. Kieran was on the couch, legs crossed, studying, but the moment Nolan stepped in, his eyes lifted, instantly locking onto him. Nolan didn't say a word. Didn't need to. He tossed his books, and Kieran's, to the side, then leaned down, capturing Kieran's lips in a slow, desperate kiss before settling into his lap. Kieran's hands immediately gripped his waist, firm yet gentle, pulling him closer as he kissed him back. "Stressed?" Kieran whispered against his lips. "Yeah," Nolan muttered, a small pout forming. "Needed you closer." Kieran hummed, his fingers tracing Nolan's lips, while his other hand rubbed slow, soothing circles on his bare back, slipping under his loose shirt. Nolan shivered. It felt so good, this warmth, this closeness, this peace with Kieran. He wouldn't trade it for anything. Without a word, he kissed him again. "Just 30 minutes, then we study again. Please?" Nolan asked, puppy eyes in full effect. Kieran chuckled, amusement flickering in his gaze. "You know I won't say no." And then, he pulled Nolan down into another kiss, deeper this time. His hands roamed, sliding beneath Nolan's shirt, fingertips brushing over warm skin, making Nolan's breath hitch. One hand trailed lower, slipping under the waistband of his loose shorts, teasingly gliding over his bare thigh, inching higher. A shiver ran down Nolan's spine. His fingers tangled into Kieran's hair, breath unsteady, as Kieran's lips found his neck, then his collarbone, kissing, biting, marking. Nolan exhaled sharply, then cupped Kieran's face, crashing their lips together again before trailing kisses down his jaw, to his throat, then lower, desperate, heated, aching. Kieran licked his lips, his own breath faltering as his hands kept exploring down, playing, teasing. The room was quiet, except for the sound of racing heartbeats, unsteady breaths, and the undeniable pull between them. And for now, the world outside didn't matter. After more than 30 minutes, they finally pulled away, though it was hard to stop. Now, both were on the couch. Kieran sat comfortably while Nolan lay across his lap, holding his book up as they studied together. Kieran's hand never stayed still, fingertips absent-mindedly running through Nolan's hair, brushing against his cheek, trailing over his neck. From time to time, they asked each other for help, mostly Nolan asking, and Kieran patiently explaining. "Do we subtract this first or something else?" Nolan asked, brows furrowed. "You can use the formula here," Kieran replied smoothly. "Even without subtracting, the answer will be the same." Nolan nodded, understanding, before his gaze drifted up to Kieran. Without thinking, he reached up, tracing his fingers over Kieran's Adam's apple. Kieran didn't flinch. He simply continued reading, but leaned slightly, giving Nolan more access. "I'll get a perfect score this time," Nolan said, voice filled with quiet determination. "Equal to you, really?" Kieran asked, glancing down at him. "Yeah, and if I do," Nolan hesitated, then blurted out, "we date." The words left his lips so fast, he didn't even give himself time to process them. He quickly looked away, focusing back on his book, as if he hadn't just said that. Kieran stared at him, heartbeat pounding in sync with Nolan's. "Then don't intentionally lose marks," Kieran teased, smirking. "I won't," Nolan shot back, locking eyes with him this time. "Then let's study harder." Kieran leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to Nolan's forehead. Nolan giggled, nodding. Time passed. The exams were stressful, yet somehow, incredible, because they had each other. When they didn't get a question right, they kissed. Pouring all their stress, all their frustration into each other's lips, losing themselves in the moment. Especially Nolan. He made it a habit. Every time he struggled with an answer, he would kiss Kieran, anytime, anywhere. And of course, Kieran never stopped him. Time passed. Now, they stood before the result board. Students gathered around, gossiping, pointing, murmuring about the rankings, but Kieran and Nolan were in their own world. Hands intertwined, hearts pounding, both staring at their results. Especially Nolan, his smile the brightest, while Kieran looked proud, as if he had expected this all along. Their names were at the very top. Both had scored the exact same marks. The highest of entire school. "So," Nolan started, a playful smirk on his lips, "where should we go for our first date?" Kieran chuckled, squeezing his hand as they walked away together. "Anywhere you like." Their hands tightened, their gazes locked, their smiles never fading. Life had never felt this good before. Nothing but love, with, of course, a little bit of bickering. They never expected to end up like this. From rivals to idiots in love, ready to walk through life, side by side.